Isaiah hanging. Test the microphone level, looking a little better there. I see the green mark going a little higher. I was hunting around for a practice data flow diagram where I give you one and you look for mistakes on it. Let me look around a little bit more for it. I thought I was close here. I'm not seeing it. Let's try data flow level 0. I know they have some in the book. They have pages, and I kind of composed my own.
Yeah, we're going to practice this.
Did you? Oh, good. Maybe that's where I hit it.
Like if you look under 5,
Oh,
the DFD practice.
let's try that. Maybe that's where it's heading. Let's visit the class here. And down under chapter, was it chapter 5 there? There's examples there. Was it an assignment?
Yeah, it's the DFD practice.
Oh, maybe that's where I put it. Let's see, what do we have here? Okay, there's where I was hiding it. Okay, let's take a look at this. Hey, thanks for pointing that out, Hannah. All right, so this is an attempt at a very generic data flow diagram with some horrible errors in here. So one at a time, let's point out the errors and give them the proper names if we can. You find one here, Micah? It looks like this was a Visio. Well, I'm not sure if this is Visio generated.
There's a couple data stores that don't receive data that is sent out. Or, yeah, and there's one that just takes it and it doesn't go anywhere.
Okay. Now with data stores, from the diagrams I've seen, we are a little more flexible as we get lower because some processes only write to a data store and we don't have to include all those other processes that read it. One thing I was thinking of, I looked at one this morning, an inventory database. And when you're processing an order, you're typically reducing the inventory. Well, there is a read. You're going to read what the inventory is now, subtract 1, then write back to it. And you might call that an inventory update process, so you're both reading and writing. But sometimes, like, you're reading the configuration setup. What is the size of my screen? Or what is the price of that particular product? And most of your processes are just reading that data store. So data stores will generally be a little more flexible, that maybe in this particular process you're only reading that. But you're right, to be absolutely perfect, you would have at some point a dotted line, maybe system initialization writes to the data store, where everything else reads from it. So here you have, what do we call this if it's only input? A black hole. Generally, I don't know if they call data store. Yeah, I think it is. If it's all arrows in, it's a black hole. If it's all arrows out, what is that? Yeah, spontaneous generation. Okay, Hannah, do you catch any others?
There's an entity to an entity, which is not right.
Yes, illegal connection, entity to entity.
Does that have a name? Or?
I don't think that has a name. I think they just call it illegal data flow. See any other data flows like that? Illegal connections between things? Here's another one. So you got 2 of them. Here's one illegal. No, sorry, that's not illegal. It is a process. You see another illegal connection here?
Process to process.
Yeah, process to process, but not data store to data store. You always have to go through a process to write data. So there's a tricky one. Do we have any black hole processes? Here's a black hole. They probably just forgot to write a data flow out of this process. We're a little fussier with processes in the context diagrams. There should always be an output. Sometimes it may be as simple as a report or status update or status of the process it was trying to attempt to do. Was a pass or fail when you told it, here's the data, go do something with it. At least a very simple yes or no, did it work kind of status. How about this one? Yeah, another only arrows out, spontaneous. So black hole, spontaneous. Here we don't have enough information to know whether these other ones are gray holes. Remember the definition of a gray hole? Where you have to see the labels of the data to know, is that a gray hole? Is the information provided a process enough to produce the output it generates? Like student grade, when all it has for input is student ID. Now, for children of the president or faculty children, that's all you need, and you know what the grade is, right? No, just kidding. But sometimes that is just, again, an oversight in what the data was sending in, saying, oh yeah, it does get data from somewhere else. Well, let's document it. I should have put another one in here showing an external entity directly to a data store. That would also have been an illegal connection, always going through a process. I think that's, do we need any other problems here? Oh, here's another problem. Our sub-processes are all given the same label. It should be 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1. So incorrect labeling. And this external entity has a slightly different icon. That's a little annoying that they're not consistent with their icon usage. This entity without the illegal connection is an orphan entity, isn't even communicating with our system, so we'll probably throw this out unless there is just a missing connection that that entity really has. Let's see, I'm not seeing any others. Lots of arrows. Generally, you try to avoid crossing lines, but sometimes it's just impossible. So those wouldn't be errors. That's more of an aesthetic thing. Try to keep them from crossing. And I think that would cover this particular one. Anyone see anything else? I'm not in, out, in, out. Of course, I would complain no labels on the data lines, but this is more of a generic example. So good. Well, I did find a short little video kind of going over the data flow idea, and let's see if this is decent quality. It sounded a little echoey on my system. We'll see how it sounds here.
Diagrams using the example of a movie rental system. So for a context diagram, we'd have our external entity as the customer. They would give their ID via their membership card to the information system. The information system would then process who they are and allow them to rent movies and probably give them a receipt. Now, as you can see, this is a context diagram. The entire information system is represented by a circle. They are the three components of a context diagram. If we're going to look at this same scenario, but through the use of a data flow diagrams, we'll notice that the layout is a bit different. So once again, we've got an external entity. Okay, they present their membership card. The membership card will be scanned. It'd be scanned and checked against the customer database, and that would bring up the user details. We would then scan the movie. The movie would be scanned against the database based on its barcode, and it would produce its details. Based on the movie's cost and the customer's payment, the transaction would be processed. Okay, this would be recorded in the transaction database. From there, a receipt would be printed, and the customer would get the receipt as well as the movies. Now, you'll notice the difference here is that we have more than one circle. In a data flow diagram, each circle represents all the processes of the system. So the system is not one whole entity as it was with the context diagram. The other difference you will notice is the use of rectangular data stores. These represent places where data is obviously stored, such as databases and spreadsheets, and they can be seen through the use of three-sided rectangles down the bottom.
Here they just label the data in and out as details. I think if I were doing this, I would try to be more specific. Customer details going in, and maybe status, try to be more detailed on the data coming out. Same thing here. What movie are they returning or requesting, or their movie rental? So this is, what is this diagramming? The rental of a movie or the return? It's not clear exactly. It looks like since they're getting a receipt, they are renting a movie. So I might put, here's the movie they're renting, the database. Again, the coming back from the database might be confirmation information or inventory numbers. Here, record payment, I have a problem with that label. What do you think my problem is? Data flow should say what the data is, not what I'm doing. So it'd be better payment details than record payments. I would call this kind of an irritating, hey, let's follow the rules. We always name what data is flowing. Here's where we name what we're doing with the data. If you want to be a pure, correct data flow diagram. Remember, the data flow diagram is just a general method to diagram your processes. Following hard and fast rules isn't totally required. It's just good practice, just so people don't go crazy. You're using them completely differently than anybody else. So I'd say, wait a minute, just to follow the rules, let's try to keep that going. But I understand what they're generally diagramming. So you may find people that don't quite follow the rules, but you can still kind of get an idea of what's going on. So that happens a lot at this level of modeling. As long as you're following similar language that people on your team understand, you'll develop an understanding of, okay, what people are meaning when they're talking about their system. So it's not a hard and fast rule. The time where you want to follow the rules specifically is in a dream like a program called, I think it's called Visual Paradigm. How that's spelled. Where this kind of program, they kind of have the dream, is my understanding of this particular program is they actually want to create the code from the written diagrams. Or when you have the code, have it show you the diagrams by reading through the code. Wouldn't that be a cool way of programming? Where you don't have to worry about, hey, does the diagram match what I'm doing, if the actual software generates the code for you from your diagrams. And that's one kind of a dream project, and maybe they're doing it, but you really have to be super clear about following the rules if you're going to actually generate code from your diagram. But their programs like this are getting close to that, where you draw the diagram and then you say, okay, generate the code based on these diagrams. I know there's code out there and I've used it. I think DIA, the UML programming for that, as we get into the writing out process symbols, which is very similar to data flow, you can actually tell it, okay, now generate the code templates that go with this drawing I have. And what it does is it generates a piece of code to go with every process. It'll say, okay, that's a function called process, and it'll give it a little code fragment based on the language of programming that you tell it that you want it to use. And remember, with this data flow diagrams, have we specified anything about what language, programming language we're doing in our project? It's fairly independent. We're kind of assuming we're going to be using a database, even though maybe in our programming we don't use a database, we just use memory to keep track of things, or the Windows registry to keep track of settings. That's all possible, but generally the idea is these are naming a future table somewhere in a database keeping track of information. Like that video example. Where did it go? Where did I lose that link? Where the inventory, you're assuming, well, that's a database, and he just kind of, as he went through that, oh yeah, that's a video database. In that here, we're kind of just assuming that's a data store database. That doesn't have to be the case. That could just be, as we're writing the program, this is just memory, or just some variables that we know we're storing information in. Could be an array. If you're talking about a simple program, doesn't need a database, but at some point you fill an array with the important information. Our little programming club, I understand, is writing a program to play Dutch Blitz. And right now, their idea is to keep all their card information in a little array of card objects. And I've been suggesting maybe they kind of do a little exploration of a thing called linked lists, that when you're handling sorting and shuffling and a group of objects that you can take and add to a deck, that a thing called a linked list instead of an array is a little more handy to be able to manage data that you would take a card out of a deck, shuffle the deck, rather than array arrangement of memory. Use a different memory. But that's details of how things get stored. At the data flow diagram level, it's just, hey, we're storing information somewhere in our concepts of how this program works. So let's take a look. Remember last time we wanted to, in our case study, to look at the details of the level 0 of our TIMS project. Now bring up my PowerPoint. Remember what we want to do for 5 is actually build, where's our case study? Is build a 2 level 1 DFD based on parts of the level 0 diagram. So, do you have anything, as you thought about that, do you have any partially complete data flow level 1s? All right.
Well, we started this a little bit last.
Yeah, we did the level 0. And where is my level 1?
I mean, I didn't add to it. I just copied and blew up what we had already done.
OneDrive's getting a little slow today. There we go. TIMS. Let's see, I have DFD. Oh, where did my TIMS? I have my functional decomposition. Uh-oh. Did I not save my... Let's go back to recent. I have DFD symbols. Oh, was I doing Visio? Yeah, that's why I'm not finding it. I forgot. I had started in PowerPoint. Now that's right, we're doing Visio. So let me bring up Visio. I was panicking there. I think, wait a minute, I did that. So Visio, and we do have, you can have Visio on your PC. I have the product keys for you, and here it is. I found it. 150224 DFD and context. Let's see if this is the one. And I think I got as far as naming a new tab. No, I don't want to connect to docs.live. It's not letting me in until I sign into docs.live. Maybe that's bothering me. Why is that needing that?
For OneDrive.
I didn't think, I'm already in my OneDrive. Look, it's wanting this from me before it will let me in. And see, Visio isn't even coming up for me unless I signed to docs.live. Let's see if I do a cancel here, see what happens. Yeah, it won't let me in. I don't remember signing up for docs.live. It's bugging me. That's irritating. But it needed a second login, even though I thought I was signed in. Okay, so here we have the level 0, right? With multiple processes. Now these are the 3 we thought of that day. And we want to give details of 2 of these. And which 2 do you want to pick? We could start with 1 and then go on.
So for the next diagram, we're just going to do like...
We're going to explode one of these sub-processes. So which one would you like to explode?
Let's do grading.
Grading process? Okay. So what we'll do here, we'll basically see if we can duplicate this slide and then throw away everything that's not the grading process so we don't have to redo all our lines. So can we duplicate this? Look at that. Right click down there on the tab, duplicate, and we'll rename that to be grading level 1. So that's process 1. And now we'll come over here to grading 1, and just to keep our sanity, let's put a title there, or change the title. Double click. There we go. Level 1. Actually, it's process 1, level 1. So grading process 1. And level 1. So let's get rid of the other processes. And if we're not dealing with content of the course, we can delete that along with its connections. If we're not dealing with accounting, then we can delete that with its connections. Student status, the other things related to accounting. Little by little, I can delete. Are we dealing with administration? I don't think so, so we can delete all of that. And now we can focus on what goes on inside the grading process and break this up into multiple sub-processes and then redo our data labels. So what can we break down in the grading process of sub-processes that happen inside the grading process? So I'm gonna go ahead and do a copy paste I copied my, oh, no, I didn't. Multiple subprocesses, and then I'll be rearranging things. So let's just assume there's going to be 3 things, but I don't know what they are yet. Let's just think of 1.1, 1.2. Haven't figured out what they are yet, but I'm just kind of getting their labels ready. This is going to go away, so let's just throw it away. Well, yeah, let's just throw it away right now, because we know we're in the grading process. Now, can we think of subprocess within the grading process? What happens? Think of as you go to submit work, the instructor grades it. What are some of the things the system does that we can give more details about? What does our code need to do to handle the grading process?
Are you gonna have like a user login? I mean, would you need that to
Well, there will be a user login. I'm thinking, let's assume they're already logged in, but that would be a separate process in our system, the whole login process.
Well, I'm just thinking like keep track of who's who.
Yeah.
I don't know if that goes.
So there will be some kind of authentication that they are in the class. We could call that authenticate. Checks that are they the student that is submitting this work. So we'll make a authenticate process, and we'll see within the grading system. We may need some other tables to check that they're authentic user. So what do we have here? We have, where do we keep track of our users? I'm not sure if we have a table keeping track of users. Student status. What's with this label here? Is there something missing here? I think our level 0 might not be complete. So they log in, they authenticate that they're in my class. What else happens as they submit homework and it's graded? We could assume that that's a separate process. We could say, wait a minute, let's just concentrate on the grading part, assuming that the work is in somewhere. Let's just say, okay, what do we do? And we'll think of another diagram for the actual submitting the work part. There may be an authenticate in many processes. But let's just assume right now that the work is in the database here, completed work. What needs to happen to grade? Well, one is suggested that we verify who they are, that they are enrolled in this class. So we're gonna have to read from some table about student or logged in users or valid users. So we may be needing another data store here. What else happens as we grade? How is the instructor involved?
Maybe a feedback system.
Yeah, so call this instructor feedback. And how about more generic, instructor assessment? So the instructor provides the grade and feedback. We'll wrap that all up in assessment. So in the completed work, we'll assume that there is somehow feedback messages attached to the work. We could treat that as a separate table and link them, or we could just say that's part of completed work, is feedback gets attached to that work, that there are these little assignments have maybe a file that goes with the assignment, and there's maybe a whole field in that particular table. Here's instructor feedback based for that assignment. But we don't have to worry about the structure of that data right now. We can just think about what kind of data goes into completed work, and we could call that feedback, instructor feedback. So the instructor gives feedback, assigns a grade, and somehow records get put into the transcript. So we can make that another process in the grading process of update grade book. And with diagrams like this, you can sit around and even have programmers, write little prototype code, write pseudocode. You know what pseudocode? It looks programming like, but it's not official perfect syntax, but it's enough to say, yeah, I get the general idea of what I need to do here. And you can sit around and write pseudocode and say, wait a minute, there's something else I need to do as we're grading. Here's another thing that has to happen, and you'll add another process to your diagram. But the whole idea here is you're on the same page as you discuss what you're doing when you're grading. Some may say, wait a minute, we're talking about too much here. Let's break this up into two processes instead of trying to handle everything we're doing in one. So by going through this practice of making your diagrams, you're laying out, is this a logical way to solve the problem? Now let's attach some data flows. Now that we kind of have an idea, okay, these are the things that go inside. Okay, completed work is going to have to do with the instructor viewing it, and that would be the instructor assessment. The instructor views results. So let's see, the course assigned grade, that has to do with assessment. The instructor is going to be able to see the submitted assignment from the instructor assessment process. Course design, we're not dealing with course design, so we'll delete that data flow in this process. The roster, that would be dealing with, well, the instructor can see the roster. Is that part of the grading process? We'll just assume that the instructor sees, here we go, the instructor is going to see the gradebook after it's been updated. And the transcript's going to get updated when the grade gets assigned. So the grades are going to the transcript. The student work is going to be, well, are they submitting the work at this point? No, they will assume, and we can put in the description, and why don't I just put that up here? I'll put that in a second line up here in the description in smaller text. Oh, I guess I can't change the text small and large within one. I'll add another text box here just to explain. Let's see, where do I get my text box? There we go. And we'll put a little description here. After student has submitted an assignment,
And the updated gradebook, wouldn't it be information coming from the instructor to the upgraded gradebook, or would it be both? We have an arrow coming from and an arrow going to?
yeah. I'm thinking the instructor is going to tell this what grade to give that assignment. So he's going to see the assignment, assign a grade to that assignment, and that process would.
So that process would go to upgrade.
Yeah, that's right. This process will tell this guy, update the gradebook now. So yeah, there's another data flow between here of final grade. So let's write that connection.
And would I delete the one from the instructor to the gradebook, or is there, I guess I don't see the connection.
Oh, I'm thinking when the instructor wants to see the grades for everybody, and just
Okay, gotcha.
where he sees, what I like is I have the assignment listed, I see the list of students, and as I go through their work, one by one, I assign a grade. Moodle in some ways has made some of this very awkward, where you have to go one by one through the assignments, where I like looking at it like an Excel spreadsheet format, and as I go through, update the grade. With our Moodle system, if I forget, and if I'm halfway through and I have to go to a meeting, I better make sure I save that grades up till then, otherwise it times out and loses all my results. And so some systems, I can actually grade using an Excel spreadsheet, and then at some point upload the Excel spreadsheet of grade assignments. So we'll say at this point, once the instructor assigns a grade, through the instructor assessment process, it sends the final grade to the gradebook. So let's call this data line final grade. And I'm thinking of this being the final grade for a particular assignment. So as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about going through one assignment, giving it a grade. At some point, the instructor sees instead of a roster, I might call that a class gradebook. And let's see if I can get this line from crossing. Can I move this around? Maybe I'll put the completed work data store over here. And let's see if I move this over here. There, it removes the crossing lines. And let's see, can I adjust the position of that? There. I'm going to make this a double line, just so they don't tromp on each other, my little data labels. Oh, it wants to connect to the side. I was thinking maybe I could get that connect to the bottom of that box. There, I have to move things around. Okay. Now, we haven't covered what happens here. They log in to the gradebook. We authenticate them. What's involved in the authentication process? What data flow and data stores? And what does the student send? Or is this something? Yeah, so let's put data flow. They send their credentials, their login, we'll call it their user password. We'll just call that credentials. So we'll label that credentials. And I think if I move this process, it might adjust that. And let's increase the size of that label. So they input their credentials. We see whether or not they're in our class. Now, we need a data store to authenticate. And these two data stores aren't quite going to work. What data store should we call it? I need some data store related to how we can authenticate them. Yeah, could I call user profiles or just users? User data store. Users, valid users. And, oh, that's right, my font is white. Not sure why that does that. And make a connection. It reads, validates them as they are a student that's allowed to see grades in this class. They may be a valid user in the system, but we want to check that they're a valid user in our class. And what do they see? Remember, we're assuming they have already submitted their work, maybe through another process. So don't worry about the submitting. We assume the completed work is here. We could go back to here and say, oh, we need a submit homework sub-process. We have a grading process. We realize, wait a minute, there's submitted work. Or we could come to here and say, hey, we need a submit your work in this whole process. And that's a valid thing to do, is say, wait a minute, our grading process includes not just viewing completed work, but sending in homework. And we can add that sub-process here. But let's get the authenticate one completed. We have their credentials, it authenticates them. What does the student want to see at this point? Dealing with our grading process. They probably want to see their grade either as a transcript or as the grade on that particular assignment. So do we have a process here that displays their grades to them?
Could be under the update gradebook, right? Or would that not be?
Well, since we're saying we're updating, we could say, okay, that does both. We could call it, we could say this does more general thing of, call it gradebook access. And we could explode this into, okay, write to it or read to it and explode this in further level. So let's make this, instead of update gradebook, let's call it gradebook management, which means I can be writing or reading from it. Or instead of management, let's call it manage gradebook. Then it's shorter words. And it's our choice as designers what to call these processes. And your general conventions, you'll start developing ways to name things. So manage gradebook, more generic, that can also now provide gradebook results to our student. So let's make that connections where the student receives from our grading process the assignment grades, or we could just call it grade. Or how about assessment results? That's a little better because that would include the feedback and the grade. So let's call it assessment results. And now we can rearrange things a little bit to make it less long lines here. Let's try, let's see, we don't want to move this guy because that line's going to drag over. We can move the student around a little bit to make that line a little shorter. And I can move my comment anywhere. That's just kind of assuming that some process has already handled the submittal of the work. And here's a good candidate for moving this. Completed work, I've got a crossing line there. Let me do a few more adjustments here. Move completed work over here, instructor here. Uh-oh, now I've got another crossing line. Let's put this over here. And as I arrange things, I get crossing lines or not. And just spread them out. Make it generally look good. And I'll make that the same height as the others. So see how going through this kind of forces you to think through the process? That's what this is all about. Thinking through what's going to happen in the system and using a common language, a common diagram technique. Just imagine if you didn't have a technique like this, every guy would come, and maybe as people work together, they'd start kind of developing their own way of describing things. Probably close to something like this, but rather than making up your own, following this kind of style gives you you don't have to spend so much time figuring out how you're going to describe things. You've already been given here's a way to describe that a lot of people use. And every system analysis course, you do a search on data flow diagrams, and you'll find this is a standard thing that's done in analysis courses. Now, in the real programming world, just like with flowcharts, maybe you're not using them so much out there in the particular projects. But at least you can't say, well, there's not a way to do that. There's standard ways to do flowcharts. Not everyone does them, just like a lot of people just don't even comment their code. But as you write it and write it with others in mind, you realize, hey, this really helps other people get on board. Now, just a little cleanup here. We'll just try to make our text readable here and adjust positions a little bit.
For the next level, do you break down these processes, or do you go back to?
Yeah, if you realize, instructor assessment, there's some things that happen in there. You can go into a third level or a level 2 and have 1.2.1, 1.2.2, as far down as you need to go to describe it in sufficient detail. That's what they call leveling. Look at that. Remove my connection. Leveling is going down into sufficient detail so that when I look at this, there's not a big question mark. Hey, there's a lot of things happening here. I don't know, have a clue what managed gradebook means. Well, you can say, okay, let's break that apart. We're updating the gradebook. We're reading from it. We're starting a new gradebook when we start a new semester. We could say, let's go into detail of that. So yes, you go down as far as you want to as you're working on processes. You may say, okay, Micah, your job is the grading process, and you start working on it, and you come back the next month. I've gotten the login, I've got putting in grades, but I'm going to need some help in what happens in managing gradebook. There's a lot of things going on because of the program we're doing, or realizing there's a lot of information that's being handled by this, and you say, let's diagram in detail, break this apart into subtasks. And you could do it for your own practice, realizing there's more things that go on, and you see a lot of data lines. That's another indication this may be a more complex process that's worth blowing up. But it's your choice how deep you go. There's no one rule about, okay, when you get this far, you've gone far enough. Okay, so there's your grading process. Want to try the, what was the other one we looked at? So I'm going to do a save before I forget here. And now we've got diagram 0. We've got course delivery. We've got some missing things here. Maybe I'll come back to that. We've got billing report. And I'm going to fix my text here. So on objects, I can adjust the text by character. On text boxes, they all are the same size. We're going to have to come back and fix some missing arrow ends. Do you have something here that maybe I lost in mind in your diagram 0?
We never did anything with the admin for diagram 0, so I'm not sure though.
I'm thinking something got erased here that all these data flows are going to. Oh, you know what? I think we started here and we kept the data lines. Say, hey, I need to put something in there. So let's fix that, and then as we think about which one of these we want to now do another data level 1 of. So system configuration, billing report, status, billing, financial status. Well, user's financial status, I'm thinking we covered that right here in the billing report. So I'm going to delete that line. Billing, we assign or handle charges. We could make this more generic and let's just call it billing, or maybe something more generic. Student accounting, student account. How about this? The very generic term, manage billing. that's definitely candidate for more sub-processes, but we'd have to figure out what, there's multiple things doing. There's checking for their charges, sending them a bill. There's blocking the setting the status so they can't get their grades until they paid their bill. There's a lot of things that could be going on inside of there. And billing data, you know, that's not a really good label for it. Data flow. What's billing? Does it mean billing data? Let's get rid of that one. Okay, admin has to do with configuring the system. I'm thinking we can have a process just for updating system configuration. So I'm going to copy that one and give him a different name. Let's call it system configuration. How about make it more obvious a verb? We'll call it configure system. Make it obviously a verb. And the status of the system is reported back to the admin. And system configuration settings are entered into the configure system. And the configure system process will be updating. Oh, I better give him a different number before I forget. He's got to be a different process number. And he will affect course content. So let's send a data flow will affect course content based on how it's configured. And the data would be, what would that data be? Course styles? Course, how about something more general? Course settings. Course settings. Like we have in our Moodle system is the maximum upload for files, student assignments. That's a global course setting, and I'm realizing since it does affect course delivery that I'm getting crossing lines. Let's move this over here and move this guy over here. I'm going to adjust my positions of things here to have fewer crossing lines. So accounting will deal with transcript data, where configuring system, and I'll put that over here. There we go. And I'll line things up to make it look a little better. Spread them out. So right now I have, oh, I've got this. Let's go ahead and add a return there so it's shorter. Admin external entity affects the status of course content. I'm sure there's lots more that we could blow up here on what can be configured in the system, because admin settings can affect how everything's displayed, so there could be a lot of connections to lots of other data stores. Course content is a nice generic data store name at this point. And sublevels, we may be breaking up this course content into main page, assignments, quizzes. There's lots of things in course delivery dealing and handling data in the course delivery process. So we've got about 10 minutes here. We could explode one of these and maybe not be complete with it. So you can always come back after thinking through it and say, I'm going to update something. I'm going to fix some text here. Is there one particular one that you'd like to expand? Billing and course delivery. Let's see if I can get rid of some crossing lines here. Try billing, okay. Surprised my lines are crossing here. You think it would figure out a better flow of these lines. I wonder if I can, let's see, let's bring this up, see if it, there we go. That gets one not crossing. Now I got this goofy one here. You think you could convince Visio to take this line and connect it at the bottom and avoid this goofy crossing here. Let's see if I can do that. No, it wants to connect from the left. So if I move it around enough, I can finally convince it to not cross the lines. So it's just a matter of moving things around and letting Visio do a better algorithm of however it decides to trace lines. Now all of a sudden this guy is crossing. I don't know why it decided to cross that guy. With that one, I think I can manually adjust his position to keep it from crossing. But if I adjust anything, Visio might go back and do its algorithm and cross lines again. So there's always going to be manual adjustment, it looks like. And Visio looks like about as good as any in trying to get a decent path. Now I saw one guy, well, and you saw that in my example one, the lines were curved. Is there a way to tell it allow curved lines in my connectors? Look at that, curved lines. Let's see what happens. Oh. If you like curved lines, you can go over to the design and choose your style of lines. Straight lines, I think I like curved better. Oh, look at that, but he still crossed it. I can still, it looks like I can still, can I adjust? No. I have the little handle there, but it's not adjustable anymore like it was with straight lines. I'm gonna go back to straight connectors, or right angle connectors. At least that lets me adjust their position, do some manual fixing. Oh, and looked like the one I selected became a straight line. I don't think I want to mix them. Let's go back to having them all be right angle. There we go. Okay, so you said manage billing. So I can look what's coming into manage billing. This time, let's see if I can just take and copy that section. Control C. And now add a new one here. And call that billing. And that was 4, right? Or was it 3? Was it 3? Okay. Yeah, 3. And now I'll paste my subsection. And if I realize another entity has to deal with this, I will bring them in. Like a student may want to see their bill, so we may want to bring that student in. But let's bring in our title. And I'm just copying and pasting just so I have a similar style and position. So this is billing, manage billing. Three, level 1. So now we're going to break this up into 3 points. Let's just make a few of them. So copy. Let's just assume we could at least break it down into 3 parts, and we'll call them 3.1, 3.2, 3.3. And then the discussion starts. Okay, what can we break down the billing into sub-processes? What sub-processes are handled with billing? And this is where you can brainstorm and then come back and consolidate your thoughts.
Maybe there needs to be like a payment.
Yeah, we take some payments. So receive. How about, oh, let's make it accounting term. Accounts receives. I don't know. That's a noun. Let's call it receive payment. Receive payment. I don't know why that gets small when I go to the next line. Receive payment. Okay? And we'll be, what happens to the receive payment? We'll be taking their money, updating our accounting tables, sending information to the accounting system about their status, recording it, so we'll have to have some recorded receipts. We need to calculate a payment, right? Calculate what they owe. So calculate
Did you calculate payments before you do receive payments?
yeah. And how you number them doesn't have to be the order they're in. But that wouldn't be a bad practice to put them in the order. So we could make that 1 just because we like to have them numbered by generally how the sequence goes. But if you find one thing that you have to change the order of something, you don't have to. It's at your choice on how fussy you want to be in naming. And then, so calculate payment, receive payment.
And then like the receipt?
Yeah.
Or
Update status, update, produce receipt. Yeah, we could produce receipt. And produce means I could print it or email.
Do you need to like update balance or
Yeah.
something like that?
Yeah. So we could have a 4th process. Update balance. Now the receipt's going to go, we could say, hey, we send the receipt to accounting, we leave it to them to send it to the student. Or we could say the student can check in to see their balance. So we would add the student entity and they could see their receipt. The student could actually view their receipt. So going back to this guy, we could say, let's add the student in there. Not only do they produce work, but they send payments to billing. So I could think, well, yeah, let's have the student be allowed to interact with the billing process, making payments. And we could adjust our main data flow, our main context, to show, yes, the student interacts with a billing process of sorts. And Visio made it easy for me to come and update that. And now the student can interact with billing. But your programmers can say, wait a minute, we don't want the student to see it. We'll let accounting send them a hard copy and say that's not part of our system. And this is where you'd say, okay, we're going to break this data connection in our system, not worry about this connection or not. I'm going to think, let's say I'm going to allow students to interact with the TIM system and pay online. Seems like the modern thing to do. So we'll call it payment details. Their credit card information, they're agreeing to pay, all sorts of things a student can do to interact with our system. And you can see my lines go a little crazy as I add more things. And I could spend a lot of time just getting things adjusted just right not gonna do that right now. So payment details. Now we come back to billing, and let's bring in our student. Copy paste, and I will bring in the payment details data as well. Shift click. Let's see if that works. And there's my student. Payment details come into receive payment. Now this may be as much as the receive payment has the credit card information in a data store. Let's produce that data store at this level. Oops, I just want the data store to be copied. Copy paste. And let's call it, well, actually, would that be part of the user table where we have their credit card in the user table? I don't know. I'm thinking I want to be very careful with this table, so we'll call it encrypted. Oh, let's just call it credit. Or billing. How about billing info? I might come back later and decide, you know, I'm just going to make that part of the whole user database. Or I could say I'm going to keep that separate on a separate system because we want this encrypted and super secure. And when I want to know their credit card, I send them off to a separate system to actually bill, because that's something we don't want easily getting out, how to, you know, their credit card information. So when I receive payment, it updates billing information. It reads it and charges it and updates it. So it needs to both write and read to the billing info table. You can have the same process reading and writing to a data store. So we'll call this, but we like to name our data. Let's call it charge. And we'll call this data balance. Actually, no. We're going to let the update balance handle writing and reading to that table. So instead of writing directly, let's just say we're going to charge them, and we tell the update balance step process, go deal with reading and writing balance. And we'll just tell them, hey, we've received a payment. We're not going to be charging them because we're received payment. We'll call this the credit. And we'll call this, we'll let update balance handle reading and writing status. And since there's enough things going on when I read and write the balance, we'll let that be a separate process. And we'll call that charges. Actually, we're giving credits. We're paying credits. And it's reading account status. We'll just call it account details. Think you have enough information there to complete that? Draw a few more data lines, and not going to be super fussy because you can see to get it perfectly right, it takes, you know, laying out, okay, what has to happen, writing some code, and you realize, hey, I need more data. And we're past time, so I'll stop there. So I won't revisit this except to maybe review what you've done. So have this completed, and you can send it. Now with Visio, you can save it as a Visio file, Remember, Visio lets you also save it, print to PDF, or I think you can export it for someone that doesn't have Visio. What's that?
Is there one that you'd rather?
No, it's just send it as Visio, just to do the easiest way. I can even share it with 2013. Let's see what the save as options give me. Surprised it didn't remember my last location.